Humanity spent centuries building gigantic concrete walls to control the flow of water. Billions of dollars in public funding and the most advanced supercomputer systems have just been defeated by exactly a pile of mud and branches. The truth is, we mistakenly believe the dryness of the North American continent was a natural condition. But in reality, this is a hydrological system that completely collapsed after the hunting of hundreds of millions of beavers in the 19th century. Concrete did not save the water supply. It only made rivers evaporate faster. This systemic failure forced engineers to throw away their entire high-tech blueprint and go learn the design of a wild rodent. Using only crude imitation dams, a physical miracle took place. Firewalls were stopped, and dozens of miles of wetlands came back to life in the middle of the desert, something modern machinery had never been able to do. How can such a small creature possess the power to restructure an entire dry continent on such a massive scale? The entire North American continent was once operated by a vast network of biological engineers numbering as many as 400 million individuals. Before the 19th century, this land possessed a hydrological system that was nearly unbeatable against drought. From temperate forests to desert canyons, a network of natural dams made of branches and mud turned 10% of the continent into a giant sponge. This mechanism stored water in winter, filtered out sediment, and regulated a steady flow through the summer, creating a state of perfect ecological balance. That age of stability came to an end when the international fur trade swept across the land. The hunting corporations of that era carried out a large-scale extermination strategy called Fur Desert. Their goal was very clear: eliminate the entire beaver population in order to create an empty buffer zone and erase the economic value of the territory for competing rivals. More than 90% of this population disappeared. By the beginning of the 20th century, from hundreds of millions of animals, only about 100,000 individuals remained in the most remote areas of Canada. Their absence was not only a biological loss, but also the beginning of a disaster. The consequence of that removal was a severe domino effect that struck directly at the geological structure. When those natural engineers disappeared, the dams decayed and broke apart. With no natural braking system left, meltwater from mountain snow and ice no longer spread out across floodplains, but instead rushed straight downstream under enormous pressure. Streams that had once meandered gently were quickly eroded into barren channels and cracks. The water surged away and escaped into the ocean within only a few short weeks. It is estimated that about 48 to 64 million acres of wetlands vanished forever. By August, the time when ecosystems need water the most, streams that should have flowed year-round turned into dry sand trenches, severely degraded by extreme heat. It was in this crisis, as water supplies dried up, that governments and the livestock industry were pushed into a dead end. In an attempt to save the situation, they deployed the heaviest and most expensive engineering solutions possible. But no one predicted that nature would respond with a systemic failure. Faced with the threat of large-scale desertification, the authorities chose the traditional engineering solution: use reinforced concrete technology to control nature. Tens of billions of dollars in federal funding were invested on a massive scale into mega hydroelectric dams, river dredging systems, and artificial underground pumping stations. These projects often began at a cost of $30,000 to $50,000 per mile of stream, not including the enormous annual maintenance expense. Even with such costly investment, these great walls carried within them a fatal physical flaw. The engineers overlooked one basic law: the larger a concrete reservoir becomes, the greater the surface area of still water exposed directly to sunlight. In desert environments, billions of gallons of water evaporate straight into the air every year because of extreme heat. At the same time, these giant concrete walls blocked the natural circulation of sediment, causing mud and silt to accumulate upstream. The standing water absorbed heat rapidly, turning into zones of extreme heat buildup that threatened the survival of many sensitive native fish species. Humanity's billion-dollar technology not only failed to save the desert, but also put heavy pressure on the ecosystem from within. Pause for 3 seconds. We often believe reinforced concrete is always superior and better at controlling risk than nature. But in reality, a billion-dollar dam can cause a more severe ecological disaster than piles of branches built by a few rodents. Do you place your trust in modern engineering or in the evolutionary mechanisms of the Earth? Leave a comment right now telling us whether you stand with technology or with nature before the truth is revealed. After many decades of wasted budget, one group of specialists finally recognized the core mistake. The truth slowly came into focus. The water had not disappeared because there was too little rain. Desert landscapes do not lack water, they only lost the mechanism that slows the flow. Once they understood that a healthy stream is not only the water flowing on the surface, but an entire vast underground system storing water below, everything began to reverse. That moment of realization opened the way to an unprecedented decision. Realizing that rigid concrete blocks were useless and that national budgets were running dry, a group of scientists decided to work directly in the field, throw away the high-tech blueprints, and imitate the handmade engineering of the very animal they had once driven away. When the environment has degraded to the point that riparian vegetation is exhausted, beavers cannot survive on their own because they lack building material. The stream banks are steep, and the fast current is ready to sweep away anything in its path. That is when the beaver dam analog, abbreviated as BDA, officially comes into existence. The way this structure works goes completely against modern engineering. Instead of deploying excavators, workers step directly into the freezing water. They use human strength to drive straight wooden posts into the stream bed, weave fallen willow branches together like basket making, and seal every gap with mud and gravel. They look crude and disorderly, but the economic equation creates a shockwave. Costs collapse to only about $1,000 to $4,000 per mile of stream. Instead of burning $1 million, you need only $10,000. Reality on the worksite is always harsher than simulated designs. In Idaho, spring flash floods snapped large numbers of wooden posts, tore apart the artificial dams, and gouged even deeper into both sides of the stream bank. No matter how carefully the engineers calculated, they were helpless before the non-linear dynamics of nature. This ecological intervention project seemed to be heading into a dead end. But a remarkable turning point came when the beavers showed no hesitation and immediately took over the unfinished human structure. With their sharp front teeth, they cut additional willow branches in the perfect size, packed them tightly into hydraulic weak points the computers had miscalculated, and piled on tons of mud for reinforcement. The loose initial structure suddenly became a solid biological fortress, completely neutralizing the destructive force of the flood. And that was only the beginning of an unprecedented chain reaction. From a small and risky experiment, an alliance never seen before between modern science and a wild rodent officially moved to the front line. But the return of abundant water was only the surface of the iceberg. The superpowers unleashed right after that directly overturned every climate prediction model. The BDA campaign, combined with beaver populations, quickly spread like a large-scale ecological counteroffensive. Susie Creek in northern Nevada, once a barren gravel bed in 1989, has now transformed into a giant wetland oasis stretching 11 miles, sustaining life even through the worst 4-year drought in recorded history. But their most astonishing superpower revealed itself only when disaster struck. In 2021, the bootleg fire burned more than 400,000 acres of forest in Oregon, turning everything into ash. But multispectral satellite data from Dr. Emily Fairfax exposed an extraordinary phenomenon in the middle of the smoking ruins. Beaver dam complexes still stood out proudly with lush green vegetation. The secret lies in a natural underground pumping system. Beaver dams constantly force water to infiltrate deep into the aquifer, turning the surrounding ground into a moisture-saturated fire shield. When flames reach these zones, they are completely stopped. These wetland oases immediately become the only life rafts, sheltering thousands of wild animals from the ring of fire. At the same time, another miracle appears below the surface. Instead of heating the water the way 20th century scientists once believed, beaver pond systems continuously circulate with groundwater. Even when the surface water is exposed to sun at 25 degrees Celsius, the water near the bottom remains as much as 5 degrees Celsius cooler. This remarkable thermal barrier has directly saved sensitive salmon populations from the threat of permanent disappearance. Witnessing these enormous effects, the academic world has been forced to wake up. This ecological miracle is not simply a heartwarming conservation story. It is directly tearing apart old textbooks and rewriting the entire economic logic of managing strategic resources around the world. The BDI campaign proves a ruthless yet profound theorem: humans absolutely cannot use machines to micromanage the complexity of nature. Every arrogant attempt to replace a keystone species with artificial infrastructure will drain national budgets dry without ever reaching the root of the problem. Look directly at the financial ledger, and the imbalance becomes obvious. Instead of spending tens of millions of dollars to build water treatment plants or pumping stations, relocating a beaver population costs only about $1,000. In return, the ecosystem receives a workforce of specialists operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, asking for no benefits and requiring no maintenance. The value of the assets they create is beyond price. From filtering heavy metals out of agricultural water to absorbing carbon to creating massive reservoirs that resist summer drought, beavers are carrying workloads so vast that no engineering corporation can truly match them. These numbers, speaking for themselves, have forced a series of major states to revise their laws and place beaver restoration inside national water security strategies. That recognition is the greatest turning point in the history of resource management. A greener future is opening up, a vivid demonstration that timely human intervention can completely reverse ecological collapse. And yet, deliberately releasing a primal wild force and handing hydrological control back to animals has never been a gamble without a very high cost. The hard truth is that wild nature never operates according to human zoning maps. When beaver populations are deliberately expanded, a new hidden ecological conflict begins to take shape between two of the greatest builder species on Earth. The core reason behind this collision lies in a difference in territorial logic. Beavers are not bound by artificial borders or by human private property. In their survival dictionary, any place where fast-moving water can be heard, whether it is a remote stream or an expensive underground city drainage system, must be blocked immediately. That diligence has accidentally triggered infrastructure disasters. Major highways have been flooded because beavers sealed drainage culverts shut, and commercial forests have suddenly turned into wetlands. To prevent these conflicts from escalating, modern science is now being forced to compromise through the use of invisible water control systems. These underground pipes operate in complete silence, deceiving the beaver's hearing so that floodwater can be released without triggering the instinct to build a dam. If we are not willing to compromise and share part of the living space, dark history may repeat itself, and this rodent could once again be wiped out. Looking at the full picture, we are forced to accept one truth: the transformation from a barren gravel bed in Nevada in 1989 into a permanent wetland oasis today is ironclad proof of the planet's rule. Destruction is always thousands of times easier and faster than recovery. And to repair ecological mistakes, humans are forced to yield, lower our arrogant ego, and learn from the small creatures of nature. Are you willing to accept infrastructure inconvenience in exchange for a thriving ecosystem? Do we have enough tolerance to give part of the territory back to nature? Or will the concrete walls soon return and sweep everything away again? Share your perspective in the comments. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon. In the next video, we will dive into an ecological intervention tragedy 100 times more brutal, where nature does not compromise, but strikes back at humanity with violent streams of toxins. See you in the next mysterious investigation.